Sir.
All right, good evening. We'll get the May 25th, 2023 regular meeting of the Finance and Audit Committee underway. Welcome, Mr. Ripper.
Yes,
Thank you. Welcome. Would you mind calling the roll, please, for us?
I will. So we have Director Wood,
Here.
and then we have, do we say director or member? Director Weber
Present.
and Director Jones.
Here.
Thank you very much. Right now is the public opportunity to discuss matters of public interest within the committee's scope, including items on or not on the agenda. Do we have any speakers?
We have not received any speaker cards.
Do we have anybody online?
There are a couple attendees. You now have the ability to unmute yourself if there's anything about the board.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent calendar.
Mr. Chair, I move consent.
A second.
We've got a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please?
Director Jones,
Yes.
Director Weber,
Aye.
Director Wood.
Aye. All right, thank you much. We'll move on to the action item. Mr. Emperdad, welcome. Good to see you.
Good afternoon, directors, Chief Haverty. Today I'm here to present the results of the audit RFP. Just to give you a background, fiscal year 2021-22 was the last year that we were under contract with our current auditor, Richardson and Company. So in accordance with best practices, the district decided to undergo a full-scale RFP, which we posted at OpenGov, which is a fully automated web-based e-procurement system for public agencies. The RFP was posted from March 24 to April 28. And upon the close of the bidding process, the purchasing division determined that there were 3 qualifying bids from 3 CPA firms, namely Badawi and Associates, Munn CPAs, and Aid Bailey LLPs. These bids were reviewed by a panel of 3 district personnel, namely the Chief Financial Officer, the Financial Analyst, and me. We rated the bids based on a technical criteria, which included team knowledge and experience, approach to audit quality, and unique qualifications. This criteria comprised 70% of the total score. On our initial assessment, we determined to invite the top 2 bidders to an oral interview, and they were given a chance to present an oral presentation about their RFPs, and also gave the panel a chance to ask questions regarding certain aspects of their bids. And then after the interview, we reconvened and made the final assessment of the technical criteria. And based on our final assessment, we determined that the top 2 bidders were on a virtual tie regarding their technical score. So it all boiled down to the cost proposal, at which point the purchasing division came in and provided the cost scores, which comprised 30% of the total score. Based on the final tally of the scores, we determined that Badawi and Associates won the audit RFP, and their proposal comprised of a 3-year contract plus 2 optional years for a total of $255,000 for the 5-year contract. On the first year, the total price is $48,000, and that price will be added to or included in the preliminary budget that will be presented next meeting to the full board. So to close my presentation, in accordance with the audit committee charter, we're requesting the audit committee to authorize the chief financial officer to enter into a contract with Badawi and Associates for audit services. With that, I'm ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Emperdad. Do we have any questions?
No, sir.
This is an action item, so I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion, please.
And I'll second.
We've got a motion and a second. Would you please call the roll?
Yes. Director Woods,
Aye.
Director Weber,
Aye.
Director Jones.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, directors.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we have the first of our presentation items. This is with Mr. Fry and Ms. Castleberry. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chief Poverty Directors. I'll wait for the presentation to come up here. I'm Erin Castleberry, Administrative Analyst in the Planning and Development Division, also your CIP Administrator. And tonight I'm happy to provide an overview of the proposed capital improvement plan for fiscal year 23-24 through fiscal year 27-28. So as a review, the purpose of our CIP is to memorialize our capital needs so that we can support the physical infrastructure of the district and maintain operations. We do this by identifying the capital needs that are required to support the mission. That would be facilities, infrastructure, apparatus and equipment, and PPE. And then we plan for the funding of these capital projects to ensure that the needs are met and we can meet our mission. As a reminder of the CIP development process, it's a coordinated planning effort across all divisions with a capital project planning process managed by the Planning and Development Division, and then the finance and budget process managed by the Finance Division. So this is a graphic here of the process. We've gone over this before. So divisions submit capital projects, which are put into both a 5-year and a 1-year plan. That plan is developed. The projects are ranked by a committee and prioritized. And then a funding plan is put together for a 1-year budget. Then the executive, we have our proposed CIP, which then comes to the board for review and approval. So our CIP this year for 23-24 through fiscal year 27-28, as you know, is made up of a 1-year capital outlay plan as well as a 5-year projection. Based on the information that was submitted this year, the projected 5-year capital need is just over $200 million. You can see the breakdown here between the different project categories: 81.8 million in apparatus and equipment, 7.6 million in new construction, in station remodels and expansion projects, 27 million in facilities repair and replacement, 4.8 million in land acquisition projects, 4.2 million in personal protective equipment projects, and 4 million in miscellaneous projects that don't otherwise fit into one of these categories. So for fiscal year, there were 53 projects submitted, totaling $100.9 million. 44 of these were new project requests, and 9 of these were projects. So here we are in the process. When I came to you in March, we had just finished ranking the projects and was beginning the preparation of the financing. Since then, finance has completed the financing preliminary budget preparation, and the executive team the recommended projects. And the proposed CIP is what next step would be board review and approval. So for 23-24, 53 projects submitted. We are recommending 14. Of the 100.9 million, the recommended funding for the 14 projects is 30. 30 of that is in carryover projects, and 4.1 million is for new projects. So we'll dive into the recommended projects here. 9 of the projects recommended are carryover projects. They make up the largest portion of the recommended funding at 34.5 million, and they were prioritized above since they were previously approved by the board. Progress, basically. So carryover projects include for apparatus and equipment replacement projects that have been delayed due to supply chain issues. 3.5 million for ongoing construction in the Zinfandel project, which we received state funding. 2.4 million for a land acquisition that was approved in the prior year. It's in the new fiscal year. 30, let's see. Projects that we are recommending funding for. Totaling 4.1 million. These projects for apparatus and equipment replacement. 700,000 for personal protective turnout replacement, and then PPE for our 125,000 for facilities repair would be for frontage improvements at Station 41. For a station access control project. Of a project that will be grant funded. This leaves 39 projects funding. This unfunded need totals 62. And the breakdown here is 24 million in new construction projects, 21.8 million in apparatus replacement projects, 12 million in facilities repair and replacement projects, 33.6 miscellaneous projects, and 270,000 in personal protective equipment projects. So, as I stated, board review and approval would be up next. The financing plan has into the preliminary budget, which Dave will go over in both the CIP alongside the preliminary budget will be presented in June for review and approval. And then we will likely be alongside final budget later in the year to account for any adjustments that needs to be made that we find. That concludes my presentation, and I thank you for your time, and we'll answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cuthbert. Do we have any questions from members?
Just, has the close to 40 million, has that been reconciled with the mid-year budget stats?
Mid-year budget or preliminary budget?
Oh, whichever comes first. Okay, let's just go for mid-year because that's the. Is that included in, well, either the preliminary and or the mid-year?
So all of the projects that are carryover projects budgeted in the current fiscal year 22-23, but because they are not complete, they are going to be carried over into the new fiscal year and therefore be accounted for in the preliminary budget.
So no monies have been carryovers? Are we at day one with that, guys?
Partial projects, some of them have spent.
Okay.
Yep, I can give you specifics on that offline, Director Jones.
Thank you.
Ms. Cuthbert, I just want to make it clear for people that are watching and may not know. The one that had out of the 100 million for proposals, about 60 million that weren't getting funded this year, weren't recommended for funding. Those are still projects that are on the 5-year as things we still need. Okay.
Correct. So that reflects just the projects that were submitted for fiscal 2024. So presumably those projects will be submitted again next year and just added to the.
They're all projects that we need to do. We need to find funding for at some point over there. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have the preliminary budget with 324. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. Directors, Chief Haverty, members of the public and colleagues. Wait for my video to come up in a moment. As you can see here, budget for fiscal year 23-24. Before I dive into my, I'd like to say a few words.
Thank you, Dave. Team and the executive management team have been working on to bring it to you today. I think preliminary budget, we need to reflect back on the mid-year. It's the projections. So, back in the mid-year. That we would end the year with about $1, which seems like a lot of money compared. That is, that projection is. That's a good thing. That we're, that. I'd like to look at that because as we look at the preliminary budget. Next year, and so past history of. As we look into this next. Well, there is good news, property. This revenue looks like it's going up a bit. We have some, the CRRD is revising, which will help the bottom line. The ambulance transportation is for a revision of those fees. That's going to help the bottom line. So your district staff is looking at to help the future. Instead, expenses are going to out, and that's a stark reality that we face. In Dave's and his team's projection, a couple of years at least. So you're going to be dipping, which is kind of a tough thing to where we are today with the contractual obligation and other costs rising. I mean, all costs. You view the kind of that big picture in mind that we present to you.
Thank you, Chief. So the agenda, this is, will be so a slide, a quick recap of the mid-year budget. Slides of overview of the budget, and then turning to largely our focus for tonight, as it's usually the focus of our forecast. I have a slide that will tie us back to the capital improvement program, which we just heard about, and then any questions or comments. And that quick recap of the mid-year budget, there were the first 6 months of the MOU that was agreed to in December. We restored 1.1 million from the capital facility. 21-22 workers' compensation fund. And we in that presentation, we discussed some challenges, if you will, workers' compensation, constant staffing cost trends over 5 years, and the non-general fund balances generally the 5-year period. The projected general fund reserve was 36.1 million or 13.4% at the end of the fiscal year. And as the fire chief said, ending point. 266.4 million, all funds and expenditures exceeding 300 million. Hit that mark in 23-24. Expenditures 285, almost 286.0, and 347.2 of all funds. Net transfers, as you see there, 17.3, and actually PPMG, which we'll be talking about momentarily, and then in all funds 14.7 with the offsets. That's the nets. The change in fund balance is negative 2.2. So in your general fund, so that's how far the general fund we would be going under this plan. And in all funds, it's negative 22.5, which, to give you some context, includes things like capital facilities funding, where we include the expenditure for the comes in, gets restored. Larger facts would be the special projects fund for the Zinfandel Training Center. That's included, that's 12. So that shows up as a negative. Development impact fees fund, 3 million into that to reflect some of these capital projects like the Grant Line Road project and the Vineyard project. Balances that are going down. At the end of the 2024 is 33.9 million.
I have a quick question. Mr.
Go ahead.
Chair. Mr. O'Toole, when you mentioned the minusing out, like, for example, the 13 million with Zinfandel, where is this chart? Okay,
That'll answer your question.
thank you.
Art, looks like we've got somebody showing up in the Q and A with comment.
We're experiencing some audio issues on the other end. Right now, so just kind of waiting for it.
I just want to make sure it wasn't a question for Mr. O'Toole. All right, thank you.
So this slide is your portrayal of all funds. It shows all across the top row. This is a combination of 2 pages from your budget. This is the budget summary, all funds page, and the fund balance summary table. Put this together because they're interconnected, and I think it's helpful to see how they. So one way to think of this, and I used this metaphor last time we looked at this, is you're saving checking account where the shade is how much it's there month to month, and then your checking account is 4 lines in the middle there with the money's coming in and out based on your income and what sort of transfers are happening that month. The general description to focus on the specific, the general fund, there's that beginning fund balance of 36. The revenue numbers and the expenditure numbers we just covered, net transfers of 17. That gets you if you take all the numbers in the unshaded section of the column there, your net is negative 2.2. So that negative 2.2 reduces that 36.1 to 33.8. That's how you read these columns, and I'll go through them a little more slowly. In capital, we start with a balance of 6.3, tied to our capital outlay spending of 16 million, with a net change in fund balance of 4.8. Of course, our 6.4 at the beginning. That was our beginning balance. So the net change, the ending fund balance, is 6. Leased properties fund. We have a beginning balance of 713,000, income of 1.2 there. Offsetting expenditures, change in fund balance is 552,000. Builds up the funding balance, goes up to grants fund, the fund we pretty much 34,000 at the end of the upcoming fiscal year. Development impact fees fund, we started with a balance of 4.2, which is a little bit higher than normal. We have 1.3. And then expenditures we've heard about before, and then even net change in ending fund balance of 1 million. The IGT clear that started with 0, the money comes in, it goes out to the general fund. So the 36 million in revenues gets sent down as expenditures or transfers to other funds. The special projects fund, that's almost all of the there's a 200,000 that was set aside for sort of administration, but that's anticipated to be spent all next year. So that's how you arrive at the your question, Director Jones. If you see the negative 22 in the far right column, a little bit to the left, you can kind of see where the changes occur that result in the fund balance. Next slide. This is the preliminary budget overview. General fund here of one slide over the beginning fund balance 22-23. So that's how that fiscal year started, was at 34.7. Moved to the right. The end of 22-23 and the start of 23-24 expected to be 36.1. And there's that $1.4 million dollar difference that the fire chief mentioned before. On this slide, we're showing all the in as other sources for revenue, expenditures. So under and then there's the net change. If you look under the 23-24 preliminary budget, there's that negative 2.2 ending fund balance 33.86%. So the reserves as a percent of expenditures, it climbed from 13.4% to a projected 11.6, a change of 1.8%. High level description of the general fund now. Specifics starting with the revenue side and then turning to the expenditure side. Revenue again is $266.4 million. That's the good news here is everything on the revenue side is growing. We're not seeing property taxes is up by 10.6 million to 199.6 million. Just for services is at 61.6 million. That's a and that includes your medic fees, the EMS fees, which is at 46.9 million, which is a $2.4 million increase over the mid-year budget or most recent budget, and the fee increase incorporated into that too. Of the general fund revenues to the last actual year from 21-22. So the same data, the same metrics you will, but just different results. Property tax to 2 years ago, charges for service fees, which is $2.1 million higher. The general fund is 22.9 over the current year. Property tax and other revenues slide in 23-24 out of steep. This will be the 11th, predicted to be the 11th year of overall revenue growth. Revenues in the budget year will be approximately generated from property taxes. Now to look, as you recall, there's 2 IGT programs. There's the public provider ground emergency medical transport. First bullet, a little back up to the state Department of Healthcare Services funds to provide medical transport services. What does that mean budgetarily? We from ERP and the net income to the now turning over to the PPP. Background is established by AB 1704 EMT programs. And on the table there, you can see 23-24. 19.9 million, so almost 20 million. And it's definitely a welcome. So that reduces that. So your difference at 12. Include those because they're only there because and some piece in the MOU agreement that was your 12.5 gets eroded by about 2.8 for the loss of the GMT programs and the member behavioral wellness incentive, which is about 2. Net income next year we anticipate being around almost 6. The ledger here. This is So labor costs, about 84%. Service and supplies, about 14, almost 15% of expenditures, and then taxes, license, about 1%. All right, so summary slide on the expenditures. 286.0 million as mentioned. That's a 21.2 million increase from 22-23, which is about 8%. On the labor compensation and benefits side, it's at million, so about $17.8 million higher. Labor costs are projected. Proceeded the slide, and 90.5. Expenditures are quite a bit larger than. Services and supplies costs are 2% higher than. Happening in the labor budget. Compensation and benefits. 12.7 million more than fiscal year 22-23 mid-year. Wages are $9.4 million higher. Constant staffing is declining. We have that down by 3 million. The incentive pays, paramedic, hazmat, and so forth. And the employee behavioral wellness incentive, which we saw on the earlier slide on IGT, that's a $2.8 million cost as well. Total benefits are on the benefit side is 105, 240. That's 5.1 million more than 22-23, and includes higher pension contributions to PERS for both miscellaneous and safety together. It's about 4. Workers' compensation claims are down. Are at 3. I want to pause on that bullet for a moment because it is something that we brought up in the mid. Costs are going up. If you recall, it was budgeted at 7. So it's a net reduction of 3.6, but that as we saw on the data, then that 7.2 was related to a lot of unexpected outside of the norm. What we've seen in the norm is about $300,000 a month. So what we're budgeting reflects that. Again, we do have the reserve, or we can, we can do as we did in the current year, with come back in the mid-year and adjust. We think based on the trends that we're seeing, the 3.6 is sufficient. And incidentally, it's $1.2 million more than we put in the budget last year before it was increased. The increased SCRS contributions of another topic where we had a discussion in the mid-year budget about the costs of SCRS contributions, and then I presented a range of we could contribute somewhere between 4.8. We're recommending 4.6, which is on with the we'll ensure we maintain the pace to address obligations to the retirees and limit swings, if you will, from core market conditions, which we expect them to, which we expect SCRS to highlight when they come to us next year and tell us how much they expect. General fund expenditures, services, and so again, it's 42.7 million, which is $4.3 million higher than the current year, 11.2% increase. I guess notable among here is the $2.4 million increase for services. That's mainly attributable to AMR, ambulance services, which is about 1.6 million of that. There's a $33,000 increase in insurance premium costs. That includes that figures will be updated. There's a contract negotiations finalization going on. So I expect that figure to be updated and come back for the final budget in a few months. If not, before we go to the full board in 2 weeks. Clothing supplies, it's mainly material and adding 318,000 computer services. 140,000 for vehicle maintenance costs, largely inflation, continuing inflation, supplies pressures there. Moving to the next slide. The last smaller piece is that debt service. Look at earlier. I'm by nearly 900,000. This is mainly. We have to contribute up to. You may recall that there was an intergovernmental. It's no longer there. Also, administration, that's about $700,000 more than we were paying in last year, and that's related to the embarked IT project to replace their property tax administration system cost, which is allocated out to all the participating local agencies. And then last, general fund payments on lease revenue bonds are $267,000. Turning to capital, the capital outlay page. This slide summarizes capital outlay from the facilities fund, development impact fee fund, special project fund, and federal funds. It ties to page 31 of the budget. Let's see, some but not all of the items shown on this page are in the CIP. CIP item, it must have a cost of at least 50,000 and a useful life of. So some of the major capital outlay projects funds shown include listed on the slide. 1 million, 6 ambulances, 6 new ambulances, 1.6 million. 3 ambulance replacements, 824,000, and a Type 5 engine. Major using the capital facilities funds include the, as shown, the Grant Line Road 220 land acquisition, which is about 2.4 million. These fund. Vineyard Springs Station build, which is 10.2 million of the development impact fee fund as well. Center, 12.7 million, which is the special projects fund. And was discussed earlier, there are several carryover projects which we expect to be delivered in 23-24. Since they were approved and funded last year, they don't show up as expenditures here in the preliminary budget. Okay, so turning to the forecast. Over here. And this forecast is shown in the next slides, next 2 slides that follow. And the forecast itself is found on page 8 of your budget report. And what we did is added 4 years to for most of the slides that follow. So we're projecting up to 27-28 with our forecast. Some of the important assumptions that are shown there. We used our property tax projections through 26-27. We incorporated the current MOU costs compensation from 25, 26 through 27 years of this forecast. PPG, EMT, and VRP are shown at 425. Pension cost share between the employer and employee. Pension shares alone. There was no change, and they're assuming 8.3% inflation for 23-24, and then stepping down 1% a year, and that's based on bureau labor. The borrowing rate stays at 4.5%, then gradually stepping down by 0.5% per year. The Fed, as we anticipate and hope, gradually backs down on their rate increases. Slide here. This is general fund revenues and expenditures. The green line is the in. The red line is expenditures and transfers out. I circled a couple of for relevance. The first one to the left that circled is 22-23. You can see that the circled revenues are exceeding expenditures for 22-23 as expected, and then in 23-24 it flips. So this is where we talk about expenditures exceed revenues, dipping in the general fund here. And you can see that trend continues out in 5-26, starts to narrow close to, and then once again anticipate revenues and transfers above expenditures in 27-28. So this chart reserve levels in the general fund over the same period that we just looked at before, 17-18 all through 27-28. At the left, you can see the millions of dollars in measured in $5 million increments, and those are the red line is the general fund reserve ratio, which ties to the percentages. The green line represents across the top. That's your 15% reserve. Reserve is shown at about 13.4%, and that is which is covering 23-24, the budget year, is showing reserves at 11.6%. If the forecast holds to around 9% and stays there before showing. Again, the main drivers here are compensation 24 and slowing property tax rates. Forecast. And we'll be watching this closely and updating you as we. Here's the financing plan. So we've heard about much of this before, so I'll just be the budget. Let's see, the financing plan 23-24 through 25-26 on 14 projects. Carryover projects. The spending makeup. 6% special projects fund. It's that big chunk. 12.5 for the mental training center. There's capital general fund about 16%. Those are transfers to the capital and development impact fee fund makes up 13%. So, and the projects are listed on this slide as you've seen. So to provide a summary information pushed out, I will try to pick out some highlights for. All sources are expected to reach 347.9 million in revenues, 14.8. PPG, EMT, and VRP add a net of 17.2 million if you include the offsets. OU agreement is fully funded through fiscal year 23-24. Included some emerging debts, if you will. So workers' compensation is $1.2 million higher than it was last year, and the reserve is preserved. We're not proposing any from the workers' comp reserve. Now the workers' comp to 4.6 million relative to we do have persistent budget pressures forecasted if property tax growth slows and labor costs significantly reducing capacity to address other needs. The projected general fund reserve as of June 30, 2024, down from the 36.1 million, 13.4% projected for the end of this fiscal year. So this is a presentation item only, and the preliminary budget is scheduled to go to the board on June 8th. My recommendation file, and before turning to questions, I do like to take a moment to thank the divisional budget officers and managers who put this together. Budget staff, Tara Mailer, Sarah Ortiz, and Juan Empedrat, sitting there, who put it all together. With that, I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Toole. Do we have any questions?
Yes.
Director Webb.
First and foremost, with the PPG, are you showing the new numbers, or are we still reflecting on the $109 recovery? And are we receiving those monies yet?
We are starting to receive them. The health plans that make the payments to us, make the payments to our vendor will make payments. Then it's slow to adapt. It's increasing every month in 400,000. And in April, we're going to find out what that is. It was around 12,000 in January. So very little compliance, significantly every month. But it's something we're in good contact with our billing provider on this one. And they are obligated to pay it all the way back. Regardless of when they pay, they do have an obligation to pay it.
And again, touching on the first, which number are we using? Or the 1100 number?
1100.
Okay. And then the other question I had was, as far as the 12.8 for the Zinfandel, is that the grant that we received that is covering that, or is that coming out of Metro Fire's general fund reserve?
That's the state appropriation from last.
Okay.
All state.
Thank you.
Director Jones.
I have several questions, but some can be offline. Questions, comments on whichever slide it is that talks about and one was 84.1% of expenditures, but now historically, haven't we always looked at that as a percentage of the? That's my recollection. So we're at not, go ahead.
I looked into that because there are different ways to portray it, and when I talked to Kim Camp, who's been around for a little while, he said we use revenues, and so when I give the 90 that is labor costs is related to revenues.
Percentage of revenue.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, the reason I asked it, because it seemed like we were using that 20 years ago. And I just wanted to make sure that we were still between apples, apples to apples, et cetera. So it has been % of revenue.
Exactly.
All right, thank you. Just hang on. Under slide, you mentioned the key, and I'm wondering down below the last it says inflation 8.3% and then decline. First, I don't understand how the 8.3 fits into this stuff. Does this long-term forecast include PERS payments and Medicare, medical health insurance payments?
The last part of your question is yes, it includes all of our expenditures are included in the forecast, but with regards to the inflation, the 8.3 is what we expect the rate to be the inflation before, and then each year after that, so 24, 25 becomes 7.3 and 25, 26 becomes 6.3 and so on.
Okay, so about current MOU costs, that does include.
It 23, 24 year, that is all built in.
And then we're 26 is going to be a 2% increase.
So because we don't know, because our MOU contract only goes through 2024, the end of 2024, asked to basically change it all. So I included for the beyond the next 2 years, an increase of.
And so you're expecting a 2% PERS increase?
The is on the benefit side. With this 2%, that is.
Confused because the second key there talks about MOU cost. I'm not sure what cost you are. Where are we? 24, 25, 25, 26. Not you, but the projections for per.
They're included. I just didn't.
Please, I'm sorry.
I didn't add a bullet for it. They're expected. There's a forecast that goes to labor. Do you have the budget with you?
Just say what you're gonna say.
Sure. The compensation category of our budget includes wages, all the incentives, paramedic. That's all on the compensation. Increase that block by 2%. But benefits, which includes the pieces you're asking about.
Yes.
Decalpers, miscellaneous, and so forth. That is included to grow as well. It just wasn't lumped in with a 2% increase to compensation.
Okay, so have we, in your projections, have you accommodated for PERS and healthcare increases
Yes, across the 5 years, yes.
across at 2%?
No, the CalPERS is, we grow that.
And that's wonderful if it stayed at 2%. That's kind of what I'm getting at, that I don't want to
Okay,
come in.
yeah.
under.
We expect it to grow faster than 2%.
And where is that found in this?
That's not in the material, but I can.
That's like several of the big black clouds hanging. That was, thank you for answering my question. Well, yes, actually. Each time we seem to see these reserve projections lower and lower every month, so I'm a bit concerned about that. I'd like to have a little bit, well, maybe either offline or extra presentation. Because that, last time it was 8% for 1 year. And now you're telling me it's at 9. So I'm concerned.
Also, we discussed that is that there was no anticipation of, after the 24-25 year, there was no expectation of compensation increases at all. So that's, and also the forecast that we're using, so there's two pieces. There was no increase, no expectation of a compensation increase, and also the property tax October of 2022. What I'm using here is a January 2023 peak. So the January 2023 property tax forecast is about 1.5% lower, depending on which year, than what we have now. So we have property tax growth shrinking, and you have compensation piece going up. That's why you see the difference in those out years.
All right. No, thank you for explaining that.
Certainly.
I think, part of, I'm gonna take some blame for that, Director Jones, because when I looked at that projection, we're doing, and I saw that labor costs at the end of the contract period, which artificially, your reserves are just gonna go up with property. So
I recognize that.
You know, so I said, start building in, even if it's a conservative guess on what that increase, so that you don't build false expectations. And go up with property tax without any, because labor costs are gonna go up. So I'll take the blame or the credit, whatever is appropriate right now.
Well, it's more of the clarification, because we would not assume
That's right.
extra costs.
Exactly.
And in a way, we should be playing.
Right.
So that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Director. Anything further?
No. I have more questions, but I'll certainly make the appointment, Mr. Chu, at a later time.
Thank you. I just have one. With the potential interruption of federal funding next month, considerations, or what do we have? What have we done for that possibility?
Well, we haven't preliminary with that, so we're not addressing that right now. Is the short answer, but watching that, anticipating. I mean, we'll have to come back to the board if necessary, but that's can float for a little while.
So that, and to the extent that there are interruptions next month and beyond next month, that's part of the reason why we have our reserve limit set at 15, a 2.5 month cushion.
Right.
And right now, to 11, we have just under a 2 month cushion in the event there are interruptions.
And those are your long-term reserves. You may have more, may have more cash reserves. Some shortage that happens if the debt crisis doesn't, last something 6 months.
It's just a very real and recognition of why the reserves are so important. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. O'Toole. Yeah, Art, just before we wrap up, I still see 2 on the related to this at all.
No, there's some audio issues that are
Thank you. I just want to make sure that people have a chance if they have. All right, our next meeting set for July 27, 2023. Unless something comes up between now and then, otherwise, we look forward to seeing you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.